Hey there, you are down with me, Anarchy. I'm here to introduce this week's episodes of Maidens, and I was kind of hoping that like flowers or a flame would shoot out or lighter fluid. But where'd the lighter fluid come from? Hmm? Hmm? So I'm doing Beetlejuice, 1988 film by Tim Burton, who I'm actually not going to spend any time doing an homage to just because he's done so many films. Honestly, if you don't know who Tim Burton is at this point, man, I really don't even know what to tell you. Um, Use your cell phone for research and not just TikTok. That would be one good recommendation. All right, I'm gonna try to give you a little treat. I don't want to get in trouble for copyright infringement again, but I figure if I keep these segments to like a couple of minutes or less, I can probably get away with it because again, I'm not trying to claim ownership, nor am I trying to monetize anything. So with that said, without further ado, let me give you this.
Why are you wearing sheets?
We're practicing.
You can see us without the sheets.
Of course I can see you.
Well, how is it that you see us and nobody else can?
Well, I read through that handbook for the recently deceased. It says, live people ignore the strange and unusual. I myself am strange and unusual.
Probably one of the most quoted lines in the film, other than when she says, when they tell her they'll give her a dark room, and she says, "My life is one big dark room." And since we're here, a little bit of this. Why not? Since we are discussing, we have two maidens this time. We've got the lovely Winona Ryder, and we've got Katherine OHara.
I'm here with you. I will live with you in this hellhole, but I must express myself. If you don't let me gut out this house and make it my own, I will go insane and I will take you with me.
Which is just so good. It's so good. So yes, we are obviously profiling me, the royal we, profiling Winona Ryder and Katherine OHara this time. So aren't you glad you're here? I'm glad you're here. We're having fun. So I'm going to begin the maidens portion of our program with Winona Ryder. You know, so if you were alive in the 90s, unless you were a bibby, you knew that Winona Ryder was pretty much an it girl, attributed to the fact that she, I think it's multifaceted, but she did have four amazing movies pretty much back to back. She did Beetlejuice in 88, which we all know and love, followed by Heathers, which I have to say, Heathers is, when I think of my definition of occult classic movies, Heathers ticks all the boxes of what that means to me. Then followed by Mermaids, which I have to admit I never saw, and Edward Scissorhands. So two movies a year in 88, or two movies in 88, two movies. I think some of these probably were nominated for awards and such. I didn't bother really looking into that because I don't know. I just didn't. Fuck off. Here's another reason you can fuck off. I did not like her in Bram Stoker's Dracula. And in fact, I found her tolerable in The Crucible. A couple of years had gone by, and then not so much from her. And then Girl Interrupted, which I have to say, such an amazing cast. I mean, honestly, it's just Vanessa Redgrave is in here too. Brittany Murphy, R.I.P. Clea Duvall, who's been in so many things. And Angelina Jolie. This was really a very well acted movie. And although I have to say my initial impression of her that she played it a little too weak, but in retrospect, I think years later, I found out how hard she worked to get this film made. She really fought for this. And I believe, yeah, acted as executive producer because she really just wanted to get the project done. And that kind of gave me a whole new respect for her because I have to say, even though she had this moment, I mean, and she did, there was a Winona Ryder moment in the 90s for sure. But I think it was largely attributed to her relationship with Johnny Depp. And I have to say, okay, what a fucking gorgeous couple. I mean, come on. Come on. But what I see here, and this is coming from an exceptionally gay woman, she is like an accessory. She always look, she's even halfway cropped out of half the pics. Well, okay, not totally. Not when you scroll over, I guess. But he just, I mean, she's gorgeous, but look at how well attired and groomed, and he kind of steals the show, and he kind of always seems to be clutching her as if she's a really expensive handbag that he's afraid he's going to lose. I don't know what was the story in that one. He seems to have like I don't know, he's all bandaged, so who knows what happened there. I was actually kind of tracking their relationship, and so they met, and these dates are easy for me to remember, even though I'm horrible with dates. And I'll tell you why. She, they started dating in 1990, and I know that because I read it. It said she was 17 in 1990, and I thought, wow, that's okay. She was a little bit younger than I thought. 1990 is easy for me personally to remember because I know that he opened the Viper Room in 93. And I know that because I know that River Phoenix died there in 93. He overdosed there tragically in 1993 on Halloween. And so that's just a date that always sticks out in my mind because he is probably the only boy that I legitimately completely had a crush on, like 100%. Yeah, so I remember the dates for very obscure reasons, but I'll tell you what, if she was 90, or if she was 90, she was 90 in 1917. No, if she was 17 in 1990 when they met, ladies and gentlemen, that means she was only 15. She was fucking 15 years old when she did Beetlejuice, which, looking back on it, she does look young, but 15 just seems so young. And then I was really thinking about, I won't go into the age difference. I've dated women 10 years younger easily, even a little bit. I'm not going to go into detail. So I'm not going to comment on it, but it's just kind of interesting because in the real world, he was 26. She was 17. He was nearly 10 years he was going on 30, nearly 10 years her senior, going on 30. She wasn't even 20 yet. I mean, if you think about this really, in the real world, he couldn't have even taken her to a bar. He, at best, would have been able to chaperone her into a rated R movie. So, whatevs, but they were Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder, so they did what they did, and they did whatever the fuck they wanted. And honestly, it doesn't seem that inappropriate. They look age appropriate, I guess, and who the fuck am I to judge? Because again, I might have dated a woman one time who was even 15 years younger. So, love is blind, or so they say. Right now, it's my distinct pleasure to talk to you about my second maiden mother and crone, Katherine OHara. I have to say, I have such mad respect for her. And I don't know if some people realize, some people maybe have never even heard, miraculously, have never even heard of her until 2015? Right. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that Schitt's Creek might have been the first time you ever encountered Katherine OHara. But God, she just does such an amazing fucking job as Moira. And I, as Moira Rose in Schitt's Creek, impeccably costumed, the accent, that bizarre as fuck it's a quasi transatlantic kind of thing that she, but the inflection is always wrong. And I just, she's so good, and I love that. I love it when artists and actors hone their craft and produce their best works of art later in life, showing that evolution of who they are, who they have been as artists. But God, Moira Rose is a thing of fucking brilliance. But talking about Katherine OHara, we have to go way back. I first became familiar with her, and I can't remember which one I saw. Probably I saw Beetlejuice first, and I can't say that actually might have been Beetlejuice actually might have been the first time I witnessed her. I don't think it was until a little bit later, but I have to say, I am a huge, and I'm going to use again, unapologetically, I am an unapologetically huge fan of the Christopher Guest mockumentaries. I've got to say, Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, and For Your Consideration. She stars in all of them. And I have to say, again, with people getting better later in life and honing their craft, the first few of these were done in the 90s. Let's see, we had 96, 2000. Okay, so the 90s and the early 2000s. For Your Consideration was the last movie that they all did together, and will be the last movie that they ever do together in their original form, because we have to consider Fred Willard, R.I.P. Fred, I fucking loved you. We have to consider him an OG core member. So they're down one from the original flock. But in For Your Consideration, she just really steals the fucking show. She's amazing. They're all amazing. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, brilliant work that deals largely in improv. As it turns out, they're all incredibly musical, and A Mighty Wind and Waiting for Guffman both have like original pieces that they wrote and performed in front of live audiences, which also just blows my mind. For Your Consideration, similarly, was a play that they performed, or actually a movie that they performed in front of a live audience at one point, I believe. I know that that was the case with Waiting for Guffman, but when you get into this whole, okay, so what's her improv background? Something that you kids today might not have ever heard of. Second City Television. Second City Television was basically the Canadian version of Saturday Night Live. I'm sorry to put it that way, but it was an improv sketch show. It aired between 76 and 84. It's distinctly Canadian if you know Canada. If not, it's one of those things that might not appeal to everybody. It's very dated. Not all the sketches held up very well, but look at some of the people that it gave us. The amazing John Candy, of course, Eugene Levy, Andrea Martin, who I fucking love, Rick Moranis, Katherine OHara, Martin Short, all of these people who I know that you know, who've been in a million things that you've loved watching, got their start here at SCTV, Second City Television. So, and she, much like, oh, I forgot to bring this up. It turns out that she actually was, I don't know where I saw this, but somewhere in her career, yes, here. So much like the SNL women like Jane Curtin, Gilda Radner, Lily Tomlin, a lot of the people who appeared, people that I'm totally forgetting right now. Gilda Radner was my favorite. They were up against these heavy fucking hitting men, like, Katherine OHara was up against Martin Short, which was huge. He was such an imposing figure. Gilda Radner had to contend with Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, Jim Belushi, all these people. As it turns out, she was Katherine OHara was actually an understudy for Gilda Radner when she first started at Second City TV. So clearly other people, I think even Bill Murray, I think a lot more people made the transition from Second City to SNL. Don't hold me. I did not research that, so don't hold me to it, but I have such a soft spot in my heart for Gilda fucking Radner and Gene Wilder. So that was a really, I don't know why that touched me the way it did, to know that she was an understudy, but that there was some connection, however tenuous, between these two amazing comedians really just made me feel great. Yeah, and so she's just worked consistently throughout the years. Katherine OHara is really amazing. And, lots of times that we just kind of look at the filmography, or I just kind of look at the filmography. And what I have to say is, while hers is totally impressive, it is. What I want to show you here even more, and I did this with Vanessa Redgrave a little bit, the awards and nominations from 78 on. And this is misleading because when you look at her filmography, let me just jump back here a bit. Sorry. If you looked just at her filmography, you'd think, wait, she didn't do her first fucking movie until 1980? That seems kind of ridiculous, because with all the SCTV background and all of the exposure and theater experience that she had, it's strange that it took that long. However, she did begin a TV series in 75, so it's 5 years sooner. But still, from the beginning, I mean, she was nominated for her first award in 78, so straight out the gate pretty much, and won a lot of things. She is very, very awarded, very celebrated, beloved goddamn comedian. I have so much respect for her. I just really do put her in that category with like Lucille Ball and gosh, even Carol Burnett and Mary Tyler Moore, all of these women who really pushed the boundaries in the early 50s, 60s, and 70s. Thank you so much, because look at how many fucking amazing female comedians we have nowadays. So brava. Thank you very much. I have so much respect for her. I just really do put her in that category with like Lucille Ball and gosh, even Carol Burnett and Mary Tyler Moore, all of these women who really pushed the boundaries. All right, witches. Now we're getting down to the magic part of it, getting down to the nitty gritty and necromancy. Look, I know a lot of you are like, Beetlejuice, what? Necromancy? But technically, that's exactly what it is. If you look at the definition of necromancy, it's the practice of magic involving communication with the dead, either by summoning Beetlejuice, or raising them bodily for divination, fortune-telling knowledge. They could be used as a weapon, any number of things, which this kind of gets into voodooism. Okay, so there are three main ways this could go. Two of them fascinate the fuck out of me, but I'm saving them for for other episodes. One, we could go the shamanistic route. There is a deep root in shamanism here, which I'm super interested in, and I've studied quite a bit. This is calling upon the ghost of the ancestors and other things, usually for benevolent purposes, sometimes for healing. And then we have the other branch is voodoo, or like I just said, voodooism, which I'm actually not as schooled on, but I do have something planned for the future. So I'm going to go ahead and table that one for now. For now, I'm going to go biblical. I'm going to go biblical on it, like I usually do. Because it's heavily rooted in the Bible and in has a lot of things. That good old ancient Catholicism. Talking about the Dark Ages again, folks. So really what this comes down to is, if you go back here to the antiquity, one other nod before we get biblical with it. Has been the subject of many different famous works of literature, such as the Odyssey, which, if you haven't read the Odyssey, it is a massive undertaking, but it's a pretty good read if you've got the endurance for it. I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there. But starting with in medieval times, you know, they believe that, okay, so look, only Jesus can go around resurrecting people. It's his thing. He can heal the lame. He can do that, but he's the one with Lazarus. So of course this led to the belief. It led to Maleficium basically was the charge, really, if anybody was known conjuring demons, especially if they were demons who took the appearance of spirits, because that's the thing about conjuring. A lot of it, it can get it can be very dangerous if you're not properly. It could get very dangerous anyway, even if you're taking all the precautions, you've cast your circle well. Conjuring is not my shtick. It's not my thing. It's not something I really have ever gotten into with my myriad practices. But yeah, I mean, the spirits can be tricky, really, really fucking tricky. The tricky little motherfuckers, and they'll try to appear to you as good angels and other things. And, usually tragedy ensues. Sometimes hilarity, but oftentimes tragedy. So let's see. Really, yeah. And of course, I'm doing this on Wikipedia, so there are some things that I don't, I question about some of these things are not well cited. So I'm talking to you more about that which I know. But what I will say is, a lot of times, necromancy in the Middle Ages had to do with casting a circle and then conjurations. Also, sacrifice. Human sacrifice was a very, very common payment for summoning. So right there, the shit's getting dark. When you're sacrificing anything, something has taken a turn. And if you're one to go down that road, go in peace. But I just don't see that happening. Yeah. So of course the ecclesiastical court was not happy about this, and the battle with this, not really battle, but this it comes up again and again throughout the Middle Ages, later Middle Ages, all the way into the Renaissance, and still exists in the modern era. But this kind of battle with the clergy and ecclesiastical law, because what's really interesting, and here's another thing that I'm going to go ahead and recommend: the apocryphal texts of the Bible are fucking fascinating. And when you start reading those and you realize that what was canonized was chosen to be canonized by a group of elders. Let me just, spoiler alert, all white men, popes and papal authorities, and the general ecclesiastical court. Really, I guess what I'm talking about here essentially is, sorry about that, but really what I was getting at there is, because a lot of the understanding of the names of God, and this is read, I'm reading it here because they state it pretty well, they were derived from a apocryphal text and from the Hebrew Torah, both of which were issued by the larger body of Catholicism or Christendom at that time. So aside from it being generally blasphemous to raise the dead people, there were some, contention about the names of God being used alongside the names of demons. So yeah, that's one aspect of it. Other aspect of it is the Catholics just like to control shit. let's see. A lot of stuff in modern era is kind of they start talking about seances and channeling and spiritualism, and a lot of stuff that I find a little bit more hokey. Although I'm not dispelling any of it, and not even saying I haven't practiced. Well, pretty much all of it, out of curiosity more than anything else. But one of the things when you get into necromancy, of course, when you look down here, sorry, went too far. Of course, one of the things that comes up is Aleister Crowley. This is hard for me because there's so many facets of his. He practiced a lot of things, and a lot of them were really interesting. The work he did with the Kabbalah and numerology, in particular, I really appreciate, and I came to kind of just accept him more as a numerologist because I'm just gonna fucking say it. The man was a fucking prick. Like, straight up, as a person, I just cannot get behind him. I think he was a complete misogynistic fucking pig. His whole suspicious, I'm sure most people have heard of this, but he was allegedly best friends with L. Ron Hubbard. I know this because I studied Scientology for a religious studies philosophy of religion class. That Dharma, if you're listening to this, Dharma, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We actually went in and we had an interview with some I don't know what they call themselves. So they're not pastors, but some officials of the Church of Scientology. I, of course, took the personality test, the whole thing. We watched Dianetics. They talk some circular bullshit. They're homophobic as fuck. And Scientology is bizarre as shit. And I could talk, that might be another episode, but they even believed, in fact, the cross they used for Scientology bears a striking resemblance to the Crowley cross that you might be, I can pull up a picture of that later. But anyway, point being, Crowley and Hubbard were said to have been best friends. Hubbard invented Scientology on a bet that the two of them made. Like, I bet I could invent my own religion and make a ton of money. It was even believed that when Crowley passed away, Hubbard hosted him. He inhabited L. Ron Hubbard, or they cohabitated inside Hubbard's body. Okay, the whole thing's just Crowley, but let's talk about some of his high points, at least in my opinionation. I actually, his banishing and purification rituals are decent. They're really classic. I mean, it's classic stuff. You're calling the elements. You can call on signs of the zodiac, the planets. It's, stuff for foundational stuff that I think is actually pretty okay in practice. Purification, same. One of the things, I'm going to skip that for a minute because I'm going to get back to that. His work with the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, if you're not familiar with it and you're at all interested in the Kabbalah, the Tree of Life, numerology, or Crowley, and you just want to expand your horizons, I would suggest reading this book, the Kabbalah 777, or what is it called? I actually have the book sitting right over there. I don't know, I could get up and go get it. I'll check that in a second. Or let's just do it. Anyway, there we go. I want to do his books. Sorry, this is terrible. But yeah, just for reference, this is the one that I like. The Kabbalistic writing, the 777. That's the one I'm going to go ahead and officially recommend on that topic. Sorry about that little digression. But it's fascinating. I have actually, his idea of the Eucharist really fascinates me too, taking it, of course, from the body of Christ bullshit that the Catholics like to do, but this whole concept of the transmutation of ordinary things like food, usually some kind of a cake, rice cake, cracker, kind of body of Christ light. I don't know what you will, call it what you will. But you can really, he believed that you could infuse the food or drink with certain properties embodied by various deities. And I've actually had a little bit of experience with this, and I'm not expert on this, but I find it fascinating, just this whole idea of transmutation, I guess. It's something that I'm very interested in. It's something that also comes up in shamanism and many different practices. So yeah, anyway, but the one important distinction that he makes is a little bit confusing, but I think it's really interesting. And this is his triangle art of the King Solomon. I think we've all seen a lot of his stuff like this. That's a lot of his magic circles and stuff. At some point, you've probably seen it, not even maybe didn't even realize that it was his. At any rate, so invocation is bringing in or identifying with a particular deity or spirit. Okay. Evocation. So this would be kind of like, you're calling, you're bringing in a particular with intention, right? This is, you're intentionally bringing in a deity or spirit. But he makes this interesting distinction, which is and I'm just going to read it because it's a pretty good explanation. There is a distinct difference between invocation and evocation. And this has got to be a direct quote. I would hope so. It looks like it. It's written that way. To invoke is to call in, just to as evoke is to call forth. That might seem like semantics, but he goes on to say, this is the essential difference between the two branches of magic. In invocation, the macrocosm, or the, macrocosm, the universe, floods the consciousness. The consciousness. It's just flooding the consciousness. In evocation, I don't know what happened there. I'm just keep rolling. In evocation, the magician, having become the macrocosm, creates a microcosm. See, this is where things get a little bit satanic, even by the Anton LaVey standards of, it's that whole do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, as Crowley says, and that kind of like, what Anton LaVey did is put man at the center of the universe. Man is God in a very similar fashion. So you invoke a god into the circle, you evoke a spirit into the triangle. That last line is a little bit cryptic, but this part, the magician having become the macrocosm creates a microcosm, is very interesting. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that at that. But I will say that when people are thinking about things like this and necromancy, and especially when it comes to necromancy and Crowley, necessarily it leads to the Necronomicon. Now, here's what's really interesting about the Necronomicon. This book, this one here that you all own. That's right. You're looking at it in your bookshelf right now. I have it too. We all do. There's no shame in that. But I've wondered over the years how many people realize that actually the Necronomicon was not a real book. Probably a lot of my friends do know this too, because a lot of my friends are also great fans of the author, immortal author, H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, that's good stuff. Everybody knows, everybody needs a little Cthulhu in their life, right? So originally, it was a fictional grimoire. And of course, as things do over time, this is, really the sign of a really well-written book. And I don't know, I guess also a testament to the type of people who enjoy this kind of work, and H.P. Lovecraft in general. Things kind of started to take on a life of their own. So nobody really knows. He said the title came to him in a dream, which totally seems possible for Lovecraft. But it has a whole pseudo history. It's very interesting to me. And at some point, I don't really know how. To be honest, I'm not totally sure how Crowley got tied into this. But I know that at some point the things became conflated, like Crowley Magick and Crowley's Magick and this somehow the Necronomicon became kind of conflated over time. But yeah, interestingly, it was really just a story about the mad Arab. I don't know how they said it at the time. Arabic. I think it was, whichever way is less culturally sensitive is probably how they said it at the time. But it's just as an interesting story, but totally made up. Okay, but so how is it that we all have this book then? What is this all about? Well, eventually somebody, here it is, Allusions to the Writings of Lovecraft. Okay, so the book itself, I guess the author, the unknown author of this book, is the one who put Crowley in the mix. Yeah, so it the author has, I don't know if the author has ever been known by anything other than Simon, which is kind of a strange pseudonym that, anyway, well, whatever floats your boat. So he claims, this person claimed to have, the Necronomicon was translated by this monk, and it's, written in, I think, mostly English, but some of the different languages, I don't know what the original languages were supposed to have been, to be honest. Oh, Greek, I guess. But I read somewhere else that Amharic maybe was also in there. At any rate, it's specious. We don't really know. But it is, the interesting thing about the book is it's kind of like 1001 Nights. It's one of those frame stories, which is an interesting literary device that, I don't know, I find it kind of fascinating. I think everybody kind of knows what a frame story is. It's when, one greater story, kind of like the never-ending story. All right. The grandfather is telling the kid, he's reading him a book, right? No, that's The Princess Bride. I'm thinking of, well, a never-ending story is a frame story too. So anytime there's a character's reading a book and then you as a viewer are seeing what is happening in that book, that is a frame story. There are, despite all of the give up, man. Specious is what I was going for, or suspect. Just shabba dabba dabba. Despite the question, the questions of authorship and so forth, the book does contain a lot of magic rituals, conjurations, incantations, seals, sigils, lots of sigils. I mean, and it's supposed to either ward off or invoke the elder gods, which is it's a vague. Some of them are pagan, some of them are pre-Christian, some are even these demons that were mentioned in the apocryphal books of the Bible, the ones that they took out on purpose. So it's kind of interesting if you root it historically that way. And here's the thing about the language that I was wondering: a mixture of English and more ancient languages, which is kind of, that's vague, but I do believe I heard Amharic. And I'm sure, like, any number of old languages might have been used. That's almost worthy of flagging for, I think they need a citation there. But at any rate, there's some stuff in there about human sacrifice. There's some stuff in there that has all of those elements of necromancy and good versus evil, conjuring, evoking, rather invoking in this case, more specifically, if you're going the Crowley route with that. It talks about, the Mesopotamian, and I'm down with the Mesopotamian gods. I like me a little bit of Marduk, got to tell you that. And it does talk about Marduk, actually that is in here, how he slew Tiamat, sorry, and clove her body in two and created heaven and earth from the two halves. So there's really some interesting stuff in there that's not total bullshit. It talks also about the cosmic war. In the book of Enoch, wait, it says I'll just read this part here because Simon's introduction claims that Lovecraft's mythos tells of the struggle between good and evil as personified by the god, or the good elder gods, and the evil great old ones. Lovecraft's work did not feature such a conflict. However, the theme of cosmic war derives instead from the apocryphal book of Enoch cited by Lovecraft in his essay. So it's, but then it goes on in later contributions to the Cthulhu mythos, I usually say, I don't know. So as much as there's like, oh, it's a real biblical tie-in with legitimacy, it's fiction. It goes from Book of Enoch to Cthulhu in one sentence here in the description, so give you an idea of, you could probably hear my phone going off. So interestingly, yeah, that was kind of where I wanted to go with that. And while I'm thinking of it, yeah, I think it's this one that looks very much like the same one they use in Scientology. Just quickly check that. I'm having a hard time typing. I don't know if it'll even come up as, oh, this one too. Okay, we saw one that looked more like the other one in the church that we went to. So obviously there's no consistency or uniform cross. That says that, well, it says that it's this one here, but I don't think that's the one that we saw. Unless I'm remembering that incorrectly, but still looks a lot like that one. Either way. Righto. All right. I'm going to pause there for a moment. Okay, witches. So that wasn't exactly as succinct as I had hoped. But hopefully it was entertaining, maybe even informative. Maybe you had a good time. Maybe you'll come back. Maybe you'll tell your friends about it. Maybe it'll change your life. I'm just putting stuff out there. I really don't know. When I figure out what I'm going to do next, I will drop a line. Thanks for being here with me. It means a lot. Stay witchy, bitches. All right, until next time.